Hi, we're going to break down the dark night of the soul, the entire anatomy, in like less than 8 minutes if you're downtown Julie Brown for that. My name is Trish. I'm a trauma-informed life coach. That's just the safe label I hide behind. I'm not that at all. I'm actually, I don't really know. I do know I've had a lot of past life regression and work, and I know that I've been killed for what I do many times in many lifetimes. Let's just put it that way. I'm back, bitch. Again. Dark night of the soul, class is in session. So we're going to start off with visuals of the dark night. We'll set it up with visuals. Let's like reverse engineer this. And then we'll talk about logistics and we'll talk about how it feels and what it means and all that shit. Sound good? And I'm just going to kind of raw dog this. I didn't plan it. I'm just going to blub it out. I love Venn diagrams. They make sense to me. So dark night of the soul is basically when two things are sort of simultaneously happening and we get caught in a space between those two things. So I'm going to break that down. So the dark night happens when who we are outgrowing is overlapping with who we are going to become at the same time. So I'm going to break this down a couple different ways, but the dark night is right here. Here's who I was. Here's who I'm becoming. I'm not really in either one of those spaces. I'm like in here. Okay. Now I'm putting framework to this in like a literal sense. We're going to talk more about it. Let me give you some more visuals. You're welcome. Here is who I was. Here's who I'm becoming. Here's the dark night. Okay. So I want to put a little framework around. So there's your caterpillar self, there's your butterfly self, and here's the dark night. Now you can't really see it that well, but I did draw a chrysalis, right? The butterfly goes into this space, turns into like a pile of goo, and then comes out like this. So in other words, this doesn't get to this without going through this. Okay? So basically the dark night of the soul is a very natural evolutionary place that every human being is going to have at least 5 or 6 if they don't cock block it, right? By calling themselves mentally ill, okay? So before we go into the dark night, our identity is pretty defined. It's like, I am a caterpillar. After we come out of the dark night, our identity is pretty defined. I am a butterfly. While we are in the dark night, there is no real solid identity to cling to. Why is this important to understand? I'm going to tell you. This is your human brain. It's not a testicle, it's a human brain, right? So your human brain, the interesting thing about this, as we cross into the dark night, we get into this space right here. Certainty, pretty abundant over here. Certainty is pretty abundant over here. We get into this space, it is not certain at all. This is especially important to understand because the biggest need of your human brain, your survival mechanism, is certainty. Also, whenever you're uncomfortable, your brain tries to get you to certainty as quickly as it possibly can. That's its job. So when it comes to the dark night of the soul, this experience here is far above your brain's pay grade, right? Your brain's like, I know how to be a caterpillar. Eventually, I will understand what it means to be a butterfly, but this bitch right here, fuck that. Which is when most people go into this evolutionary state, they're often diagnosed as mentally challenged, they have a mental health issue, when actually it's a huge moment of spiritual growth. This isn't dark witchcraft. When people hear the dark night of the soul, they're like, oh, is that bad? No, it's like very normal human experience. Like, here's me as a baby in my mother's belly. Here's me on the other side of that experience. And here's labor. Okay? It's normal. It's part of being human, just like taking poops and stuff. But if we don't understand it, what will happen is we'll get stuck, usually on this side of the transformational process, and we'll call it a mental health issue. It's controversial, but you're just going to have to fucking trust me on this. This is why if you're not self-aware, this will take much longer and be much more painful to get through if you just listen to what I have to tell you. Are we tracking with this? So the question is, what does it feel like in here? I'm going to be very frank with you, what it feels like in here. You ever had the norovirus? You ever had that or horrible food poisoning where it's coming out both ends and you feel like you're going to die and that scares the shit out of you, literally. Then you realize you're not going to die and that's even scarier. Yeah, it's kind of like that. sounds inspirational when people talk about it in like a fucking, basic bitch way. They're like, you're a little caterpillar turning into a butterfly. P.S. You're going to have like the emotional form of neurovirus as you come through here. And I'm going to try to do the best I can to give you like the self-awareness version of some Zofran to help us navigate that a little better. Now, when anybody ever enters the dark night, which means they're about to evolve, our brain has some really limited sort of navigational tools that it likes to implement when we are in fact shitting and throwing up at the same time, evolutionarily. The greatest hits of the ego in this space are typically, they sound like this. Make this fucking stop right now. How fucking long is this gonna last? I can't do this. How am I gonna pay my rent? Help me survive this immediately by any means necessary. In other words, people, like there's very disempowering thought process that's going through this space, especially because people are not self-aware enough to understand what's going on. And emotionally, when you're there, when you can't go back to something, but you actually haven't attached to something new either. In other words, think of this as letting go of one trapeze bar and reaching for the next trapeze bar, but you haven't reached any space, or you haven't reached any, it's like that liminal space in between. It's very emotionally disruptive, which means this part of you is going to be chatting away like a monkey in a tree. Oh my God, I can't pay my rent. I'm scared. I don't know. I have no job. Nobody's coming for me. What am I going to do? Maybe I go to the past. Maybe I can like rehash some of that. Maybe I can like plan for the future and rehash that. It's like, no. Pause. Let's teach you how to navigate the dark night like a boss. Beautiful questions during the dark night. What part of me is trying to evolve? What emotional state have I been avoiding and repeating patterns? What patterns, new patterns, am I going to need to implement? What is this here to teach me? What am I supposed to unlearn here? If this dark night of the soul was going to last indefinitely, what would I need to cultivate within myself in order to stay here forever? I know it's a weird thing, but it actually does help expedite the dark night of the soul. The best way to expedite the dark night of the soul is come into a state of empowerment. So we have to move from disempowering questions, like, how the fuck do I make this stop, to empowering questions. What is this here to teach me? And the reason most people stay stuck on the other side of this too long is they're asking those disempowering questions. Because our brains can only make decisions based on what our brains have already experienced. The brain is going to keep pushing us back into something that doesn't exist anymore, right? Some people in a spiritual sense call it the hand of the grave. A version of you that's trying to alchemize or die is reaching up through the grave and pulling you back down into a version of yourself that you are outgrowing, which is why it feels even worse. Typically, when people are here, they feel depressed, they feel lost, they feel hopeless, they feel like they have no roadmap, they feel like nobody understands them. I think a lot of this is happening in the collective right now. You can't fit in with the caterpillars anymore, but you don't feel good enough to hang out with the butterflies. You're just this weird goo in between. But the truth is, you're meant to be moving over here. This is where you're meant to go, which means there are parts of you that are not going to fit through the door of where you're going next. And you're going to have to show up a little differently. You're going to have to start to think a little differently. You're going to have to let go of some things to get over here. Here's the other thing about the dark night. It's really presenting you with an opportunity to become nervous system flexible. In other words, build some strength in here, right? If we try to expedite this, if we try to pull this butterfly out of this too fast, you know what will happen? It kills it. Fastest way to get out of the dark night of the soul is to get comfortable there. Like I said, if we try to pull you out of there too fast, we try to engineer it, you're going to miss the lessons. This is going to become a problem. Does that make sense? Empowering questions. What is this here to teach me? Normalizing discomfort. It will not last, just like the neurovirus. We're doing a workshop on that this weekend, The whole anatomy of this, we're going to break it down. You can check it out right in my bio. Sometimes a little framework is all you need to try to expedite this whole process a little bit. And that's exactly what we're here to do. The dark night is not a scary thing. It's a human thing. You're fine. I love you. I see you. I'll see you tomorrow.